Injustice: Gods Among Us was not a very good movie. Here's the reason why. I don't want to be one of these guys who says that the movie sucks because it didn't follow the storyline down to a T, right? There were a lot of similarities there. The reason why the Injustice movie was bad is because it missed everything that made Injustice significant. Injustice was a philosophical story, and in fact, a lot of people misinterpret who exactly it is that Injustice is critiquing. But let's kind of break this down for a second, right? So in terms of the movie, the catalyst behind it all is the exact same as it is in the comics, that basically Joker tricks Superman into killing Lois Lane and their unborn child. In response to that, Superman freaks out, kills the Joker, and then basically turns the Justice League, minus Batman, into what's basically an autocratic governing body ruling the world. On the surface, that sounds like a pretty villainous thing to do, but once you start getting into the philosophical reasons as to why it happens, it actually makes sense, right? So let's talk about Batman and Superman for a second, because honestly, one of the most disappointing things in the animated movie, you never see them fight. I don't know why, but there were a few things that were pretty significant here, right? So Batman and Superman, at least in terms of this story, have two completely and totally diametrically opposing views. So on one side, Batman believes in a no-killing rule, right? And he's like Peacemaker from Suicide Squad. He doesn't care how many men, women, and children have to die in order for him to maintain that no-killing rule. And then on the other hand, you have Superman who says, no, there are some people out there who are just so incorrigible that the only way to deal with them is to kill them, right? The Joker's a perfect example of that. The whole idea behind that is the Joker leaving Gotham City, showing up in Metropolis, and then basically instigating a series of events that leads to Superman killing his wife and his unborn child. That's Batman's fault. And no better moment in the entire Injustice comic series highlights that than when they first meet after Superman kills the Joker. There's this great big huge argument that goes on in the Batcave. You saw it to a degree, right? But the best thing about this is that they get into it, right? I mean, it's a full-blown argument here. And the whole stance that Batman has is, we have to be better, and you, Superman, we're supposed to be the best of us. This incorrigible, incorruptible person who could never fall prey to the failings of humanity, that you were the one who inspired not only many of the superhero community to become superheroes, but the one that would lead the world into going to a better direction. The response to Superman is, what happened to me happened because of you, Batman, because how many innocent people have died because you let the Joker go? That Batman knew the Joker could not be held by the criminal justice system. He knew the criminal justice system is corrupt. He knew that it was easy for the Joker to escape. He's done it so many times before. And every time the Joker escapes, he goes on a killing spree. Sometimes it's dozens, sometimes it's thousands, depending on what story you're reading. But the Joker always goes on a killing spree. Batman snatches him up, he hands him over to the authorities can't hold him, the Joker escapes, and the cycle repeats itself. And the argument Superman presented here is, if you knew that wasn't the case, and you knew the Joker escaping would lead to him killing people, then you willingly sacrificed human lives because you thought it was wrong to kill the Joker. No, he needed to die. He had to die because he couldn't be fixed. He couldn't be saved. There was no way to make him better. And in your foolish pursuit of this ideology of not killing people, you sacrificed thousands of innocent lives. So in a lot of ways, you're worse than I am. But at the end of the day, Batman stays strong and says, no, that it doesn't work that way. We cannot be judge, jury, and executioner. And that's when the critique of everything comes into play. So here's what's really, really cool about this, right? There's a movie called Kill Bill that I'm sure some of you guys have seen, some of you guys haven't. In that movie, or at least in the second movie, there's this phenomenal moment where Bill has this monologue and he explains the nature of Superman. What Bill says in this is that a staple of the superhero mythos is that you have the superhero and you have the alter ego. That Batman is really Bruce Wayne, Spider-Man is Peter Parker. That when those characters get up in the morning, they're Bruce Wayne and they're Peter Parker. And it's in that characteristic that Superman stands alone. That Superman didn't become Superman. Superman was born Superman. The outfit that he wears with the big red S, that's what he was wearing when the Kents found him. Those are his clothes. The glasses and the business suit, that's the costume. That's the costume Superman wears to blend in with us. That Clark Kent is how Superman sees us. And what are the characteristics of Clark Kent, right? Bill says Clark Kent is weak, he's unsure of himself, he's a coward. That Clark Kent is Superman's critique on the whole human race. Now, take that concept and extrapolate it out into the injustice mythos, right? That when Superman kills the Joker, that was one part anger over the fact that Joker tricked him into killing his wife and his unborn child, and the other part of it was pragmatism, that it was just time, right? That the Joker just needed to go, like he just needed to die because there was no conceivable way to fix or save this guy, and Batman believing it could be done was just wide-eyed childhood optimism, right? Living in a fantasy land instead of in the real world. And then at that point, Superman's entire gaze turns into the rest of humanity, and that's the critique. That's what made Injustice so cool. Injustice Gods Among Us is not a critique of the failure of Batman because of his no-killing rule or the fact that Superman became corrupted and conquered the world. It's a critique on humanity. It's a critique on people, that Superman did what he did because people just didn't fix anything, right? That in a world that is largely governed by presidents and senates and all that kind of stuff, right? Official governing bodies who in turn are largely elected by people, that there's war and there's chaos and there's robbery and death and destruction. And that when it all came down to it, like very much what we see in the real world, it's Reddit posts, Twitter hashtags, but no one ever actually doing anything to fix anything. And so the response is, or at least the response to Superman is, if the world won't make itself better, then I will. I will fix the world, right? Humanity had its chance, right? These people that exist in these societies, they had their chance to fix things and they didn't. Whether it was because of lazy incompetence, complacency, or all of the above, whatever the case happened to be, they didn't want to fix anything. Well, if they won't, then I will. I will make things better. And so that's when Superman starts traveling around the world and has like instructs these ceasefires, right? Like, if you as governments do not fix this, if you do not stop fighting, I will destroy you all. And then there'll be nothing left of anybody to fight. So either you can rule in peace or you can die in chaos. One of those two options, but it's gonna be one. Now, while all this was happening, it wasn't enough to show Superman doing this. That wouldn't really be very eventful, right? Superman just ending conflicts among governments by threat or anything along those lines. Superman's parents being kidnapped by the president, which is one of the dumbest things he could have done. It wouldn't be enough to show that. What you need is a counterweight. You need us as the audience in the story. And while you had Batman, who was basically leading what you would call insurgents, those individuals who defected from Superman, who thought he was doing the wrong thing, sided with Batman and just taking pot shots where they could, some of whom died, some of whom continued on. The whole thing behind this is you had the Flash, and that's one of the things the movie screwed up so bad, because the Flash, gone like that, right? I mean, he's dead in the first 10 minutes, and it blew balls because you had Mr. Terrific there, but at the end of the day, Barry Allen should have been that guy, because Barry Allen in a lot of ways is the character in the comics who sways back and forth. He's us. He is torn. He doesn't know who to side with. Is Batman correct? Is Batman right in saying superheroes shouldn't be forming some kind of autocratic governing body to control the world? But at the same time, he looks at Superman and says, but did the inaction of society itself, the laziness, complacency, or ineptitude of society, did they force Superman's hand? Did they put him in a position to where, because they weren't willing to fix anything, that he was going to fix it? Is Superman right? Are there some beings out there who just can't be fixed and have to die? And a lot of arguments get brought up there, right? The chess game you saw in the animated movie, that was between the Flash and Superman. And one of the coolest things about that is that whole conversation happens at super speed. They're just moving like super fast. It's cool. But all the points that Mr. Terrific brought up is basically the same thing that Superman brought up. But through it all, even though Barry is explaining this perspective, he still struggles, because you have what's called the slippery slope argument. But the slippery slope argument is an argument you present when you don't have any other argument, because the slippery slope argument assumes that you can't stop yourself, that what you're doing is a compulsion, that you can't simply say, this is the line in the sand, this is where we stop, and that's an absolute line. Done. There's no justification beyond doing that. Like, you do what is in effect following the philosophy of Superman, which is the needs of the many outweigh the needs of the few. And the argument that Barry Allen was producing was saying, okay, so like, you're gonna reach a point where you're basically going to arrest people for petty things, for things that don't really matter, for things that aren't important, because you want to make sure they're following the law that you create. And so that's what's kind of interesting about that, is over the course of the whole Injustice series, Barry is conflicted. He's like us. He doesn't know which side to go with. He doesn't know who's really right here. Now, a lot of that really comes to a head with a character that was totally left out of the animated movie called Galaxin, right? This was a kid who had basically idolized the Justice League. And in fact, he was the Flash's biggest fan, but he had idolized Superman and Wonder Woman and Batman and the Flash. He saw them as these beings who always championed and did what was right. But there came a point when Superman became this kind of dictator that when he showed up in a town and was like, we're ruling this whole place with an iron fist, that kind of a thing, that Galaxin stood up to Superman and got absolutely pummeled. Now, it's not until he's beaten within an inch of his life that you actually find out the whole idea that he was a big fan of the Justice League, and then you're told later on down the line that he basically killed himself. They undid that in Justice 2, which I wasn't really the biggest fan of, but you end up learning the kid killed himself because of his experience, because it was just so traumatizing for him. But then you also had Black Adam, and that was a great concept because you had Shazam and you had Wonder Woman who showed up on the doorstep of Black Adam and Kahndaq and said, Superman's rule is going to be absolute. Will you ally yourself with Superman? And because Black Adam's whole allegiance is to his people in his kingdom, come what may, he'll let the world burn before he lets anybody in Kahndaq experience any kind of pain or suffering. The response he gives is, I'm fine as long as Superman doesn't show up here. If Superman shows up in Kahndaq and tells me that I have to follow his rule of law, no, we'll go to blows. I will fight Superman. And so what they do is they force him to transform back into his human form, and he dies. But like, there's a point there where he begs Billy Batson to protect his people, to keep his people safe. It's things like that. You learn over the course of the comic book series that like Harley Quinn had a daughter that she had to give up. It's just stuff like that. There's so much character development there that expands on the individual characters. And while that may in and of itself not be the most important thing, the fact that the characters are carrying around the weights of their own individual struggles, their own backstories, their suffering adds even more gravitas to what's going on, because now they have to make this moral choice between Batman or Superman. Which one is right? Which one of these guys is making the right call? The Injustice comic series was just phenomenal, but I still stick by the idea that what made Injustice so great is that it was a critique of people. It was a critique of the ineptitude and the laziness and the apathy of the average person when it came to fixing anything wrong, right? It was people who were just like, something needs to be done. I mean, somebody else will do it, but like something needs to be done, right? Like, you know, raising awareness, like there's a problem there. Somebody else will fix it, but I did my job. I told people there was an issue there, right? That kind of a thing, right? That sure, it sounds nice and it's a great way to pat yourself on the back, but like standing on a street corner with a sign for a day and a half and doing nothing isn't going to fix anything. And so the whole critique about that is people. People were the problem. They forced the hand of Superman because somebody had to make the world better and they weren't going to. And so again, I loved Injustice Gods Among Us. All that was missed over the course of the animated film. The animated film, it felt just so redundant, right? It was basically just like, well, Batman and Superman are fighting each other because Superman's wife and his unborn kid were killed by the Joker, and so now they're fighting, and then here comes Ra's al Ghul with the Amazo android, and now that's the main villain, and they gotta fight the Amazo android, and then just when you think they're gonna be able to mend that rift, that Superman steadfast, so they bring in Superman from an alternate universe, and then the two of them fight, and Injustice Superman comes out on top, but then here comes Lois Lane to convince him that he's wrong, and it's just like, I mean, it looks like it was a movie that was written by suits in a boardroom, right? It doesn't look like the Injustice series because it carries none of the gravitas behind it. In all reality, that movie should have been a few movies. It should have been like 2 or 3 movies. DC Animated's done it before, and that's what's so disappointing about this, because I will always stand by until such a time that changes. I will always support the idea. The DC animated movies are far and away much better than the DC live action movies, right? The DC live action movies pale in comparison to the animated movies. The animated movies are phenomenal. If you've never seen them, you need to watch them. Up until Injustice, I was never really disappointed by an animated movie that they made. There were some questionable choices, but by and large, they were just great, right? The DC animated films, I would say even rival and in some ways exceed the Marvel Cinematic Universe. But this, it was bad, man. It was just so basic and formulaic and boring. There was no point when I was on the edge of my seat. There was no point when it was like, yes, thank you, like that's what I was looking for. No point when that was the case. It was just kind of like, I mean, you know, we didn't even get to see Yellow Lantern Superman. Right, Superman when he joins the Sinestro Corps. We never even got to see that, right? It was just things like that. It was a hugely missed opportunity. And so having said all of that, if you're a person who never read the Injustice comic series, I mean, sure, I guess you'll like it, but even you might find it just kind of be like, I mean, it's pretty basic and boring. If you're a person who read the Injustice comic series, it's gonna be lacking in more than a few ways. So with that being said, guys, we're gonna bring this to an end. Let me know down in the comments section what you liked and what you disliked about the Injustice movie. Thank you guys for watching, and I will catch you all later. Peace.